What job is criminally underpaid?
Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started.
Story 1. Daycare costs are so expensive, but at the same time I have to admit I couldn't manage a room full of toddlers all day long. Those, generally, ladies don't make nearly enough to be the angels they are. Answer. Daycare is incredibly labor, space, and material intensive. So many little requirements and so much square footage needed. Plus insurance. Very hard to turn a lot of profit, which is why chains are taking over. Which is sad because the care is bad. It is a terrible field and needs change at the systematic level. It's expensive because it's expensive to do well. If you'd like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. Link is in the description. I'll show the most interesting messages in my videos. Story 2. EMTs, paramedics, nurses for the most part, basically anyone in healthcare that isn't a specialist surgeon. Elder care folks deserve more too. Teachers should be paid better too. Story 3. Special education teachers, especially teachers doing behavior units or high-incident disabilities. People forget they exist, and often they're the ones with the hardest kids. Story 4. Every job that's not keeping up with the cost of living. If you're working a full-time job, you shouldn't be sinking in debt trying to afford basic necessities. Story 5. Basically, any job deemed as essential during the pandemic. Teachers, EMTs, most healthcare workers, DSPs, the list goes on. Then it got subjective. Myself, as a hairstylist, never felt so belittled ever as a service provider. It changed the whole scope of what we do being luxury versus necessity. It made me quit hair. Story 6. General practitioners, MDs. Nobody wants to do it, although primary care is backbone of any reasonable healthcare system. Story 7. Teachers, they're basically shaping the entire future and still gotta buy their own classroom supplies. Answer. My wife is a teacher. It's horrible. We have to pay out of pocket for things for her classroom. A lot of times she has to go in early, stay over to get stuff ready or finished with no extra pay and etc. I've worked at my current job for 7 years and have no college education and make at or slightly over $100K a year. She's been teaching for like 12 years with a master's and makes less than I do. She also has a harder job than I do. The stuff teachers have to deal with is ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. Story 8. My wife is a school teacher, specials, K through 12, and puts in 60 to 80 hours a week, some weeks more. In the summer, it's still 20 to 30 hours a week for those 7 weeks off. She makes 14 of what I do as a corporate remote worker, putting in a light 30 in my home office. I have a lot invested in my career. There are weeks I work like she does, but not many, and sweating out a corporate urgency on a Zoom call is a lot different than managing kids, parents, and administration face-to-face. We massively underpay teachers. Story 9. Vet techs. I am a vet and the techs are horribly underpaid. McDonald's burger flippers make more in many cases. Story 10. Let's be real. 90% of jobs are underpaid. Teachers, janitors, service jobs, nurses, delivery workers. Name a job, it's probably underpaid. Story 11. Social workers. We take out massive student loan debt and spend years working with the most traumatized members of our society, often living paycheck to paycheck while deep in debt to work a life of service. Story 12. Chefs and cooks are consistently some of the lowest paid workers at a restaurant, yet they're also the workers that the entire business hinges upon. Meanwhile, the highest paid person is the owner, which 90% of the time is just a glorified investor with lots of capital. Story 13. Nurses, healthcare aides, because of its long hours, duty, emotional labor, life or passing responsibility, but salaries don't always reflect it. Story 14. Local news journalists. Some are paid the same as a fast food worker, and they are covering essential daily news events for entire cities and regions. Story 15. Education, including those working in daycares and those in special education. EMT fire, CNAS, pharmacy techs, janitors. Story 16. Aircraft mechanics. To have so many lives depending on you doing your job correctly, and then to see the wages very akin to the EMT first responders conversation. Story 17. Anyone in conservation. From park rangers to game wardens, we need to be better at protecting our natural resources. Story 18. Teachers. They have to do so much work to make sure our kids learn, especially since so many kids are unable to read, even past 3rd grade, or respect authority these days. Story 19. Teachers. My partner is a teacher and she questions her life decisions to go into teaching almost daily. The band teacher is quitting before this semester is even over. The band teacher. Story 20. Teachers, paraprofessionals, especially in special needs classrooms, health aides, many nurses, and absolutely EMTs and paramedics, as flat accountant 6590 said. Story 21. CNAs. You have better pay and work environment at freaking McDonald's. I'm baffled by how they can even fill any positions at all. Story 22. Teachers. They deal with children all day and often need to pull money out of pocket for supplies and activities in school. Story 23. Teachers. Students are a fudge menace, and it's no wonder teachers stop giving a shoot after doing it for so long, which unfortunately creates a cycle of bad students and bad teachers. They definitely don't get paid enough. Story 24. Teachers. They have one of the most important jobs in society, yet they're grossly underpaid and underappreciated. Story 25. Who the fudge are we kidding? Nobody is getting paid their job's worth personal skill. Fudge corpos. Story 26. Teaching toddlers, having 15 toddlers in one class is no different from having 15 drunkards in class. Story 27. Not trying to diminish the sacrifice made by first responders. Teachers get paid so poorly that I can't understand why anyone would do it. Such an important job. EMTs and teachers save our society every day, all day. They should all be paid more and provided the respect they deserve. Who agrees? Story 28. Teachers. Literally, people complain education isn't good enough, but then they don't care that teachers don't make enough for what they do. People to where the money is. Story 29. Teachers. They work so many more hours than just their contract hours, don't get paid for IEP meetings, which are all throughout the year, and have to buy their own supplies and pay for their own printing. Story 30. Teachers. They have been for generations. Nurses, EMTs, cops, librarians. Everyone who actually helps society is underpaid because they're all supposedly motivated by caring and therefore are expected to sacrifice money. The unfunny part is that if you paid teachers and cops and EMTs what they are actually worth, this would be a darn better place to live. But morons don't understand any of that because they're morons. And perhaps we shouldn't dislike morons. Perhaps. Story 31. Teachers underpaid about somehow always the villain. People who never opened any book on pedagogical care somehow always know better. Can't think of a much more shoot deal outside of some of the other big ones already mentioned. Story 32. Assisted living and home care, giving, not private practice, memory care, basically anything to do with the elderly. I did it for a year, and while it was the most rewarding thing I've ever done, it also broke me over that year in a ton of different ways. All for $12.50 HR. This was like 2011, but still was miserable compensation even then. And the responsibility over roughly 60 people's lives and well-being at any given moment, generally with maybe 3 to 4 other people, and that was adequately staffed. Anyone who does that job is an absolute selfless hero in my book because there is no good outcome or saving the day. Doctors, EMS, etc. can potentially save people. Caregivers, it's always just a matter of time, no matter what. The limited, fleeting bonds you could form with people at the end of their lives, the stories, the ramblings from a better time. These experiences could range from days to weeks to months, and surely a few years, but they were always inevitably ended. No happy endings, other than the morbid piece of seeing someone suffering pass in their sleep, rather than a fall or hospice care. Story 33. It's gotta be teachers. They are literally shaping the next generation, putting in insane hours grading and planning, dealing with helicopter parents. And on top of all that, they're often expected to pay for their own classroom supplies out of pocket. It's a job that requires a ton of education and emotional labor, and the pay is an absolute disgrace for the value they provide. Story 34. Teachers. It never made much sense to me that teachers get paid far less than police when the teachers have the more important job. Story 35. Teachers, firefighters, EMTs, and I know I will get dislike for this, but receptionists and customer service. Story 36. School bus drivers. For close to minimum wage, they have to safely drive a large vehicle on roads full of bad drivers and inclement weather, while also supervising up to 84 students at the same time. Adding on to that, they also need to perform lengthy vehicle inspections and cleaning before beginning their route, and this is often unpaid. Story 37. Public school teachers. Kids are a lot, even while being pretty well behaved. Parents can be insufferable and impossible to manage. Story 38. I think the teachers, also especially in public schools, shaping future generations, yet often struggling to make ends meet. Story 39. The hardest job I ever had was my first job after college, which paid 13 hours in Northern California. This was a few years ago. I'm guessing now it might be 17. I worked at a dual diagnosis youth facility for 4 to 18-year-olds with severe autism spectrum disorders and other disorders, behavioral disorders, schizophrenia, etc. I felt like I was going into war every day because there were only a few of us mental health counselors who had to do everything from serving food, cleaning poop, handing out meds, to holding clients back on the freeway when they were trying to jump or try to get them to stop throwing chairs or biting us each other. That job severely affected my mental health, and I got paid $13 an hour for it when I had a bachelor's degree and years of experience in the MH field. Story 40. Sanitation, especially at hospitals. They have to clean up all kinds of biohazards and dangerous substances, but get paid only $1 or so above minimum wage. Imagine getting paid $13 to clean blood and shoot off the ceiling. Story 41. All of the ones where you work all day and a person under 23 can't figure out how to do your job in a week, and you don't make enough for a house and to have 2 kids. Story 42. Honestly, janitor work. You gotta clean up after a kid throws up, a father shoot next to the toilet, and the mother waiting for everybody to get done so she can get back to shopping and go home. Story 43. Every single one. Livable wage is estimated at 35 hours. Minimum wage is 9 hours in some states. So glad the billionaires get richer though, while the middle class slowly becomes defunct as it splits into either lower or upper, and people go to college for a career to use in order to pay off their college. Story 44. Gardener. Guys mowing lawn when it's 105 out is noble as fudge. Impossible to appreciate or pay them enough. Story 45. Waitstaff. The fact that it is legal to pay them like 3 hours and make them rely on tips to afford to live is criminal, especially with all the bullshit they have to put up with. It shouldn't be legal to so badly pay someone below the federal minimum wage simply because they get tipped. Story 46. At this point, in the U.S., if you compare the wages of 1970s in today, most jobs are criminally underpaid by 70s standards. Not all, of course, especially upper management. Story 47. Cooks. When I went from working in kitchens to working in tech, I was shocked how little work actually gets done. Story 48. I'm not a teacher, but I would have to say school teachers. They deal with kids all day and try to instill knowledge and understanding. Not paid near enough. Story 49. Teachers, emergency medical workers, ER staff, hospital nurses, most people who work for nonprofits, public defense, childcare OMG, home health care, so much. Story 50. Bicycle mechanics, or technicians if you prefer. I'm not sure what the going rate is now, but when I worked in the retail bike industry, it was laughably low. They use skills and knowledge every day to serve customers and make profit for their employer. Their skills take years to learn and perfect. Story 51. For the time of schooling and the work done, physician assistants, PA, seems like a bad deal to me. Google shows a salary range of 80 to 150K range, and most around 120K. That's a middle management salary with way too many responsibilities. Story 52. Vet techs. They're janitors, receptionists, nurses, accountants, even doctors sometimes. Job of 5 people for the pay of a half of one. Story 53. Childcare provider. In many ways, they are setting the future even more than K-12 teachers, who aren't paid much better but definitely better than CC providers. Story 54. In California, I'm a pool lifeguard with extensive training and knowledge and get paid minimum wage, $17 an hour, while the people in the weight room get paid $22 an hour for wiping down sweating equipment, and we're stuck cleaning child poop out of the pool, probably more often than you think. I can no longer enjoy public pools. If someone passes out or any medical emergency, they call guards over to handle the situation. It like that for our entire facility. Story 55. Teachers, I think, is the obvious answer. Librarians as well. I might be biased because I am one. Actually, any job that isn't in entertainment, sports, or tech. Story 56. I am a teacher, but paraprofessionals can make criminally low salaries for what they have to do each day. Story 57. Blue-collar criminals. Just one good lick and you can retire. Simply isn't true anymore. Most wind up working for an organization, cartel, or syndicate, all notorious for skimming your benefits. Plus, with them, early retirement doesn't mean the same as it does for other workers. That or go solo. But most people don't know how difficult it is to be your own crime boss. It's unfair. White-collar criminals make 37 times more money, almost never get prosecuted, work 9 to 5 mostly, and their kids go to good schools. Story 58. My quick off-the-dome vote is caregivers for elderly. I pay $6,000 a month for my grandpa to stay in a home where he can be properly cared for. There are about 8 other residents there, and the nurse lady that helps him makes about $25 an hour. $48,000 month coming in, and you are paying 3 nurses $25 an hour to do 100 of the work required? Unreal to me. Story 59. News videographers have to shoot some pretty traumatic stuff and be in rough areas. Also, video takes a lot of work for something that lasts for one show. Guy at the #1 station in my area was making $18 an hour. Not to mention you work nights and weekends. It's awful. Story 60. I think in most of the U.S., teachers. Here in Ontario, Canada, we're paid pretty well, and no 10 commandments. Story 61. Most jobs, as in, like literal crimes being committed. Wage theft exceeds every other form of theft and robbery in the U.S. combined if you look at the actual dollar amounts being taken. Story 62. Vet techs. They take care of our animals at their most scared. And yet most techs I know have another job because they can't exist on just the vet tech salary. Story 63. Anything in the trade's blue-collar labor. They work harder physically in one day than most do in a year, while making barely minimum wage. Not the owners, the average roofer, etc. Story 64. Food. Anything food. Farmers, fieldworks, processors, the people moving it around and keeping it cold. All of it. The whole supply chain. I'm also going to lump grocery store workers, cooks, servers, chefs, cafeteria workers, all of it. Here is the thing. You put this stuff in your body. There are so few things you can say this about, and this stuff can eliminate you if mishandled. Additionally, every great civilization is 3 meals away from collapse. Societies are precariously reliant on complex, fragile food systems for stability, and a breakdown in the food supply can quickly lead to chaos, civil disobedience, and societal collapse. Seriously, people stop eating. We get riots in the streets and violence. Quick. Now, do you really want this mantle of responsibility placed on the lowest paid people in society? If you get food and it's bad, it can eliminate. If you don't get food, that will eliminate you. If other people don't get food, they will eliminate you. Food systems. The food systems are under-resourced. Story 65. The guys that make license plates in most states. Also, low-end jobs where the inmate is paid nothing, like dorm porters and yard crew. There's Prison Industries Authority, PIA, where the pay scale was from 25 cents an hour all the way up to 95 cents an hour. Firefighting crews are paid, I believe, $1 a day, except when they are fighting the fires, at which time they're paid $1 an hour. Story 66. Working parents. Not at all hating on stay-at-home parents. You guys are amazing. But I feel like at this point, someone should give me a little overtime pay for driving the kids to school, working 8 hours, coming straight home to make dinner, driving the kids to extracurriculars, and then cleaning the house before sitting down for a moment to myself for the first time in 12 hours. Story 67. When my husband and I were in Ohio State Reformatory, where the Shawshank Redemption was filmed, on a guided tour they told us that 2 real prisons nearby are hiring correctional officers for 22 to 24 hours. Story 68. Emergency dispatchers. In my city, they are essentially categorized as an administrative assistant instead of a first responder. The stress levels they go through is intense and definitely needs to be better paid. Story 69. Teachers. Teaching kids to read and write can't be easy. They essentially set up the foundation for learning. They deserve better pay. Story 70. Correction officers. Regardless of your opinion of the criminal justice system, these people are in an environment where violence is currency, and there is a very real threat of having human waste thrown on you on a daily basis. Story 71. ICE agent. No matter how much fess, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and live with that. No thanks. Story 72. Mechanics. Also, there's a lot of manual labor jobs that pay well, but there are many that pay just enough to live despite wearing and tearing the body with horrible quality of life. Story 73. Veterinary technicians. I was one during and for some time after COVID because I couldn't do my normal job during that time. Those, mostly, women push themselves to unbelievable levels to help animals. And most of the treatments and tests they do are the exact same tests that humans nurses do, but they make at least $10 less per hour, if not more. Not to mention how insanely corrupt nearly every practice is becoming because they need to sell out to corporations in order to survive. The money that the doctors bring home compared to the techs is crazy, and a lot of the time the doctor does absolutely nothing with your animal. They come in and talk and then hand it off to the tech, who is better and more trained than the doctor. Obviously, this is just my experiences. Either way, they don't make enough while saving the lives of our furry family members. Story 74. Care assistants. They often get paid minimum wage and are basically taking care of people with dementia and people who are end of life. Then people complain that their parents, grandparents, are not being taken care of better. Pay them a decent wage, and the industry will be better staffed. They will be less stressed and less likely to leave, resulting in better care overall. Story 75. Librarians. They are de facto social workers and IT professionals. We do not get paid enough, trained enough, and sure as hell supported enough by admin for all the abuse we take. Yet we still love to help people with vital, free services that are necessities every darn day. Story 76. EMTs. People are put in the lives of surgeons, sure, but to get to the ER, someone has to keep them living alive to make it there while moving at 40 miles per hour. Story 77. Paramedics. For years, I had assumed they were paid well, but holy F, they are not, at least where I live. The amount of traumatic shoot they experience, along with a fair paycheck, they should also have counselors on constant retainer at their disposal. Story 78. The salary at the major state university I worked at for many years pays about 40 under market rate for tech roles. Story 79. Mine. I'm a scrub tech for interventional radiology, and they don't pay me shoot, and I went to this job after busting my jerk in ICU because it was a significant raise, and then a company came in and screws me over. Story 80. Teachers, social workers, health aides, any work that doesn't make profits but genuinely helps people who need it. Story 81. Bus drivers, apparently. I don't know what they make, but my kids' district and all surrounding can't keep them. Story 82. Line cooks. On their feet the whole shift, standing in front of poorly ventilated spaces, heat in their face, various co-workers and/or customers yelling at them, and the stress of non-stop order after order to make, all for minimum wage. They also usually make a fraction of the tips the servers make. I was in the industry for 15 years and dealt with plantar fasciitis until I left. Story 83. Nursing. Being a paramedic. Basically anything in the medical field that requires a degree or cert but isn't seen as good enough compared to being a doctor. Story 84. Honestly, most low-skill or low-tier jobs in the USA, if not outright all of them, are criminally underpaid. 100 of minimum wage jobs are underpaid. Even your average burger flipper. Any full-time job should allow one to be able to have a home, food, actual usable healthcare without bankruptcy threat, and other basic needs. We can and should at the very least be guaranteed that. The problem is, if we did have that, then the ever-widening wealth gap in the US wouldn't exist. And obviously, we can't have that. Story 85. Production supervisor at a factory. I make $80K and I'm in charge of a whole factory. My decisions affect the flow of tens of millions of dollars, and I'm responsible for the safety and well-being of my employees. Plus, I have to have all the answers for everything that happens. Sure, some people look at it like it's an easy job, but they really don't know anything it takes to be a supervisor. Story 86. IT. When everything works, you get asked, what do we pay you for? When everything goes to shoot because Microsoft screwed up an update, we get asked, why are we paying you for? Story 87. Daycare providers. I love my kids, but splitting 16 two-year-olds between a couple teachers sounds physically and mentally exhausting to me. Story 88. Accountants. They should be making like 7 figures. Don't look at my career sub-history, I promise I'm not biased. Story 89. Almost anything traditionally considered women's work. Nursing, daycare worker, teaching, serving, anti-violence workers, elder care, care attendants, etc. And yes, EMTs. Story 90. Corrections officers. They work 12-hour shifts, caring for some of the most dangerous people and being in vulnerable situations. And you're telling me they only get paid $21 an hour? Sometimes even less than that. Story 91. I'd also add janitors, custodians to the list. You want all the frontline sanitation folks to be professional and paid very well. I just saw someone squish his jerk cheeks onto a couple of mass transit grab bars and leave a mark. FFS. I don't want anyone half-assing that cleanup. Story 92. Legal assistants and the support staff in most DA's offices. Imagine making $15 an hour to pour through the same gore and violation footage that has to go to trial as the attorneys, often while being overworked in general, and all without attorneys' pay. Story 93. It seems like some of the most important jobs, teachers, medical personnel, social workers, etc., are underpaid, as if it being fulfilling is a trade-off. Someone in this thread even said it's because people would do that for free. What a joke. The fulfillment doesn't override the weight or the fact that these people have to make a living. Story 94. Public defense. Caseloads beyond any other criminal defense attorney's imagination, and at sometimes half of the rate they would get in private practice. And most often, they have the most experience with the DAs, judges, and clerks, which works heavily in the defendant's advantage. Story 95. Ski patrollers. Hella talented on skis, are pretty much avalanche test dummies at times, plant explosives, and act as EMTs on the mountain. I'm sure I'm missing something, but I've seen that they do some pretty risky biz in places like Big Sky. Story 96. The trucking industry. But then when I worked for CRST for 3 months, my trainer kicked me out of his truck because he needed a blowjob from a lot lizard on the 3rd day. 3 women were brutally violated by their trainers within the 3 months I was there. It was 2015. At the end of the month, I had $60, and all I spent my money on was ramen. Story 97. Veterinary assistants and technicians. I've been a technician for 8 years, have 2 degrees, and only make 19 hours. Story 98. Any job in the physical sciences. You can be in grad school as long as a MD and end up making 14 of what they do. Story 99. Everyone has given the American perspective. I'm going to give you an Indian perspective. It's litigation lawyers, criminal, commercial, etc. Story 100. EMTs, paramedics, surgical technologists. Basically all medical professionals except for doctors and RNs. Story 101. People keep saying paramedics, and I don't know about them, but I'm a paramedic firefighter, and I clear $130K a year. If you get a firefighter job, you're good, and the pension, you're set. Story 102. CNA. The shoot, literally, my wife has to go through every day, makes me so mad and sad at the same time. She's in hospice care and is proof that angels walk among us. I could never deal with the things hospice workers go through mentally and physically each day. Love all you CNA nurses. Thank you for all you do. Story 103. Getting rid of illegal immigrants isn't going to fix America's problems. Americans foot the bill of waiters through tips. Healthcare and teachers are underpaid as designed. Yet people voted for a Nepo baby. Story 104. Line cook chefs. The amount of stress they are out under is amazing, and they have it day in and out for pennies. Story 105. Firemen. My son was a 4-year scholarship athlete, got his graduate degree in human science, and has always wanted to serve his entire life. He just got graduated fire school at a top-tier fire department. He's now in EMT school, which is another requirement for being a fireman. He makes $51K a year. To be fair, he pays no Social Security and has a fantastic pension if he stays there 30 years. Great benefits all around, really. But $51K? These guys are always the first responders. He's already seen 2 people die, several badly injured. I asked him what he did at work the other day, and he said he scraped brains off the highway. He loves his job and takes a ton of pride in what he and his team do every day. He works 24 hours on, 48 hours off, so almost all of them have second jobs. It's a great career, but these guys get my vote for the most criminally underpaid. Story 106. Preschool teachers and daycare workers. Lucky to make 15 an hour and work to passing. No benefits and long hours. Story 107. Physicians. Broke as fudge and owe the government a criminal amount of money. But I love it so. It was worth it. Story 108. EMTs, teachers, pre-K to 12, and childcare specialists. Wendy's employees make more than most of them in my area. Story 109. Anybody in most retail jobs. I did retail for a long time growing up, and too many people, customers, have the mindset of, the customer is always right, I will berate you, and if you do anything about it, you will lose your job. They think like this because it's true. Story 110. The term I use to summarize most people who are underpaid is passion exploitation. There are some exceptions like surgeons and some STEM jobs, but for the most part, if you're passionate about what you're doing, you're probably underpaid and overworked. Museums and cool tourist attractions, animal-based jobs like zoos and kennels, cooking, Michelin star restaurants are the worst. Healthcare, childcare, teaching, entry-level on-the-job training, automotive jobs. Story 111. Flight instructors. I worked at a school where, if you did everything right and worked an insane, unsafe number of hours, you could make $30,000 a year with no benefits. This is to teach other people to fly aircraft. Airline employees have unions. Flight instructors should too. Story 112. Pretty much any manufacturing jobs. Generalist labor. Highly physically demanding, but wages are comparable to light retail or customer service-oriented occupations. On a related note, anyone who has been with the same company full-time for 20 to 30 years, yet their salary is only 30 to 45K annually. Breaks my heart to see people give their whole lives to a company only to be just scraping by. Story 113. I love how everyone's first thought is EMT paramedics. It's sad it's universally known they get paid absolute shoot for their work. Story 114. Vet tech. I was a tech for about 9 years, and it's wild how close to minimum wage you get paid while performing extremely crucial procedures to save and treat animals. You only really make any money when you go into specialty, and then you just burn out but can afford rent. Story 115. People who clean our drains and streets. People think that just because that worker is perhaps not that educated or skilled, this was their last resort. And sure, that might be the case. But it's such an essential and borderline inhuman job that sits at the core of existence of sustenance of our infrastructure. That makes me feel these people are criminally underpaid. If your drains start overflowing, all the muck on your roads and lawns would literally stop your world. Plus, we just aren't appreciative enough of them doing their job faithfully. Story 116. My darn job that I've stayed at for far too long while trying to keep things stable during a family crisis. Story 117. Cooks restaurant workers. It's not technical work. People in Morocco roast the same as Polynesian people, but most people just don't know how. The word restaurant comes from the French word that means restore. The very first doctors and nurses, shaman or witch doctors or healers, whatever term is appropriate, didn't have potions or pills or surgery to fix a problem. The tools they used to fix people was food, hearty stews, vegetables, bread. Still to this day, the best preventative medicine is eating your vegetables and some legumes and walking half a dozen miles each day. The right diet can prevent disease or lessen the symptoms. Sure, no heart disease and no diabetes too, but Alzheimer's disease and other mental ailments may be impacted by diet. Culinarians get paid so little for saving the human race. Story 118. Basically anything in the blue-collar field. They keep the world turning, but corporations act like they're disposable. Without the manual laborers of the world. Story 119. I didn't scroll through to see if this was mentioned. Fast food drive-through worker. I did this job many years ago, and it was fudge stressful. I had to take orders, bag up food, take payments, etc. All the while, there was a big red countdown clock above me, which tracked how long it was from a car ordering to leaving the payment and delivery area. Once it got to 0, an alarm went off, which was super helpful to my job of taking orders, bagging orders, taking payments, and handing food over to customers. Probably only 5 of drive-through customers are assholes, but when you are doing that job, it's a statistically significant amount. And since I worked the night shift, I also got to clean the dining room, the bathrooms, and the whole kitchen area every night. Story 120. Food industry jobs where the server or anyone that makes tips is not paid minimum wage. It's not criminal really, but should be. Story 121. Pretty much every position that falls under the category of talent, the ones who actually create and deliver the product service to the customers. Also, anyone whose job can be summed up as keeping the floors and bathrooms clean and the lights on. Story 122. Nurses. There is literally no reason why someone typing on a keyboard and clicking a mouse all day to build web apps, should be making more than my mom, who has been a nurse for over 35 years. And teachers. Story 123. Like, most of them, honestly. Employees are literally sharing their lives with their jobs. They are giving up their most precious resource, their time. Time spent with friends and family. Time spent doing the things that they love, having experiences, making memories, all of which they'd rather be doing than going to work all day for most of their lives. In exchange for that, the very least you can do is provide them a good enough wage to allow them to live comfortably and still have enough time for everything else that life should be about. Not to mention enough to retire on when they decide to call it quits. What amount do you suppose that is? And what % of people make that? Story 124. Certified nurse aides. During my training, I had to scoop shoot out of a bleeding prolapsed jerk. Another aide, who was terrible, made me hold up a 500-pound woman in her bed with no help and threw out my back, all for 16 hours. Story 125. Child care caretaker. I know people think it is an unskilled job, but people have no idea how depression and anxiety can affect a child. I live close to a private daycare place. They charge parents over $3,000 a month for each kid and pay their caretakers minimum wage. Although the ratio is like 4 to 1, which is okay, but come on. If each kid is 5 per hour with a caretaker, that's 20 per hour, not 12 per hour. And assume each kid is there for 40 hours a week, 160 hours per month. 3,160 is close to 20 per hour. This means the admin takes about 70 of the cut, while the person doing the work gets 30. WTF. And by the way, no benefits because they don't actually work 40 hours a week. The admins make sure they only work about 20 hours at most to avoid giving them any health benefits. And yet I know plenty of good people doing this kind of work, but also people who probably need their demons exorcised. But hey, that's capitalism, right? Story 126. Roadside assistance techs and companies. I'm not talking tow companies, just roadside assistance companies that don't tow. Motor clubs pay us 20 per job. No extras, no mileage, nothing. They say it's competitive with other roadside assistance companies. Story 127. The local juvenile detention center guards make 20 per hour on day shift. There is a 2-shift differential for second, third shifts. This is in Indiana. Jail guards get paid about the same. Story 128. Caretakers. They get slapped and kicked, wipe people's butts and change adult diapers for minimum wage. Story 129. Child care workers. Imagine getting paid just over minimum wage to watch a full class of 2-year-olds that you must clean and change diapers, provide activities, give naps and feed. Story 130. Surgical technicians. They basically have to know how to do every kind of surgery, just like a surgeon. Most could even do the surgery themselves blindfolded. They get paid peanuts. Story 131. Firefighters, EMTs, and police. They save lives, often risking their own. They deserve a lot more than they are paid. We count on them. Story 132. Teachers. Especially where I'm from, Hawaii, they were always short on cash. I remember seeing my kindergarten teacher working at the local grocery store as a cashier. My middle school English teacher also told us on day one, "Don't fudge with me. I don't get paid enough." Verbatim. Even today, many teachers have another job or two in addition to teaching because the cost of living is absurdly expensive in Hawaii. Story 133. In the U.S., waitresses, it's criminal to pay someone to and make them rely on customers' generosity and not on the restaurant. Story 134. Hospital healthcare assistants. Nowadays, nurses are buried in paperwork, and they handle all patients' work. Story 135. This list is so long anymore. Nurses, teachers, all first responders, most blue-collar jobs we directly rely on. People who care for the elderly and animals. People who maintain our forest and national parks. Counselors and caseworkers. Story 136. I would say night shifts in hospitality. We almost got eliminated by a guest once. Also, we are here to react and save lives if needed. Story 137. Teachers, EMS, 911 dispatchers. Base pay for the last two are embarrassing, and you need to work overtime to make it happen. Story 138. Teachers, EMTs, caretakers, child elder care. You know, all the people that deal with the inevitable needs no one wants to deal with. Story 139. Claim adjusters. Worst fudge job I've ever done. Stressed to the max daily, overworked, overwhelmed, nobody ever happy to talk to you. It blows. Story 140. The jobs that are essential for society to function are criminally underpaid. We could get rid of almost all white-collar jobs and society would function better, at least for a while. Story 141. Anything that requires being compassionate or having empathy. Any job where you screw people over pays fat stacks. Story 142. Load dispatchers. I was reading up on load dispatchers recently. Load dispatchers are people who actively manage a municipal electrical grid. They serve on the clock 247 in shifts to prevent outages and make sure the entire grid system operates in a controlled manner. Story 143. Preschool teacher. They're with kids during the most critical years of development and are looked at as glorified babysitters. Story 144. Teachers and care providers. To think the amount of investment we put into our future, it's actually disgusting. Teachers, daycare providers, kids before kindy, and care providers for senior retirees are disgustingly underpaid. In addition, frontline respondents from paramedics, police officers, firefighters, to think about how much are paid to save and rescue lives compared to absolute jerk CEOs is absolutely absurd. Story 145. I work in construction, and the guys who come change the porta potties don't get paid nearly enough for the job they do. I honestly hope they make more than me. Story 146. Technically, all of them, but any of the more active first responders, like EMTs, paramedics, firefighters, ambulance crews, and the like. Story 147. Driver's ed teachers. $13 an hour to be unappreciated and put your life on the line for someone else's kid, and the parent doesn't want to do their part. Or an argumentative adult who doesn't take direction anyway. Story 148. Almost anything in hospitality, if you have never worked there, you would never understand the amount of stupid and rude people you have to deal with on a daily basis. Story 149. Any minimum wage job, especially minimum wage jobs that were quote-unquote essential services during the COVID pandemic. Story 150. Wildland firefighters. In the 10 years I fought forest fires, I went from 10.11 HR to 15.00. It's marginally better now, but still way underpaid for the demands of the work. Story 151. Machinists. So many machinists are incredibly knowledgeable engineers with a ton of experience, and they get terrible compensation. I don't understand why. There aren't that many people who can do the job. Story 152. I get paid $20 as a mitigation technician. I clean sewage, clean hoarders' houses, clean mold, clean fire damage. When I show family pictures and videos of my days at work, they are mortified. Story 153. Therapy. With a master's, fully licensed in multiple states, up to date on all CE and trained in specialized areas, I get 35 HRs from a company that only pays me when patients show up. Late cancels or no call, no show, no money for me. Am 1099, so I have to pay awfully high taxes. I am Ocho and get no benefits, and am expected to see 50 people per week and do all their treatment planning, actual treatment, compliant documentation, and billing within 24 hours of seeing them, signing all their paperwork and keeping up to date on the latest treatments, all with 7 minutes between sessions if we start and stop on time. If I go private practice and cash only, I can make more, but then I have to do all that plus the business management and advertising and overhead costs. Story 154. Building architects have to do a ton of schooling, master's degree at least, and often make less than $50K. Story 155. Basically, any job. All jobs should pay people enough to get by and not have to stress about living paycheck to paycheck. And yes, I mean those ones who actually work and do their jobs. Story 156. Vet staff. The average length of a career for support staff is roughly 3 to 5 years, with low pay, burnout, and physical and/or mental scars. Veterinarians have the highest rate of tragic end in any profession. They rarely make good money, yet are constantly accused of only being in it for the money. Story 157. The people who empty septic tanks. I don't know what they're paid, but whatever it is, it's not enough. Story 158. Any jobs healthcare. Primary and secondary education. Also waiters in the U.S., their systematic exploitation is ridiculous and is illegal in any civilized country. Story 159. Customer service roles, having to take shoot from people for policies and decisions made by someone else who doesn't have to hear the blowback directly. Story 160, teachers. My daughter and son-in-law are both middle school teachers, and I had no idea that they pay for so much themselves. Story 161, nearly all working-class jobs, considering how high the cost of living has raised in the past 100 years compared to wages. Story 162, cart pusher. They have to do it in every single weather. They get hit by cars or almost do. Customers are hella inconsiderate when it comes to putting the cart away when they're done with it. The list goes on. I feel for cart pushers. Story 163, care job for disabled and old people. It's hard enough to care for your own family, that's someone else's. Story 164, meaning careers, care roles, anything that can be described as they do it for the passion, not for the pay. Story 165. I worked at a Las Vegas strip casino in the count room over 10 years ago. We counted all the paper money from the slot machines and table games, tens of thousands of dollars on a regular day. On New Year's Eve, $1 million in cash, easy. I made 10 an hour. Now I think the going rate is 12 to 14. It always boggled my mind that the people responsible for millions in cash got paid less than a McDonald's worker. I am in no way putting down fast food workers, BTWA. Story 166. First responders. Here in San Francisco, our police officers make around $120K a year. That seems like a lot until you realize that a 2-bedroom apartment is $5K a month, taking out $60,000 a year. I live away from the city, so it's slightly cheaper, but $120K is low for saving lives and fighting off criminals. Story 167. Vet techs. Vet assistants. School or no school, criminally underpaid, treated like you don't know anything because you don't have extra letters in front and at the end of your name, but then expected to explain why the person with letters in front and after their name want to do X treatment. All to be told no, that's too expensive, or laugh at you while their dog tries biting you. And you're also expected to clean messes, do laundry, help the doctor, do x-rays, help in surgery, and do a million things that are opposite of each other. Story 168. Preschool teaching and daycare, as low as $7.25 an hour. First 5 is the most important, is true, but we sure AF don't pay like it is. Story 169. Meme lords, Rizmaxers, and aura farmers. They serve to raise the next generation to be fine adults. IMO, they should be paid with the finest stipend. Story 170. Sanitation workers. They're underpaid and work in dangerously toxic environments without adequate safety apparatus. Story 171. Pretty much all the jobs that do all the work and keep companies running while the executives we could all do without rake in all the money. Story 172. Graduate assistants. They do nearly all the research in the country and a lot of the teaching as well, and only earn a minimum wage. Story 173. Cognizant Technological Solutions. Salesforce admins. Making a full half of what a lucky junior admin makes elsewhere. Story 174. Maintenance personnel. Not all, but by and large, I'm convinced it is why everything is going to shoot. No one worth a darn is willing to do the work for pennies. Story 175. Home attendants, if they're good. I just met an abusive one who verbally abused me during my partner's care. Story 176. Care assistants. We get shouted at, assaulted, and beaten by residents. We clean up, shoot, piss, and vomit. We serve tea, biscuits, and entire meals for 6p above minimum wage. Seriously, pay care assistants more. We do it all. Story 177. Servers. Less than $3 an hour and you have to hope people tip. And then you have to tip out? I'm not a server and will never be one if I can keep it that way. But I'm friends with many and I feel for them. Some days can be great, don't get me wrong, but the inconsistency is crazy. Story 178. In the US, the teachers are definitely underpaid. In other countries, education is important. Having good schools is important. In the US, by not prioritizing the young, their education or their teachers have instead produced school shooters. Story 179. Lollipop person, UK. This is a job with enormous responsibility, and if you watch one carefully, it's actually a very skilled and somewhat dangerous job. Story 180. Have a coworker that used to be an EMT, applied to my job as a filler, started making more money at a pretty big chain grocery store, quit being an EMT because he was losing money by being one. It's quite fudge terrible, not being able to pursue the passion of saving and helping because you simply won't make enough to scrape by. Story 181. Direct care staff for adults with developmental disabilities. They have to perform every role for their clients: teacher, nurse, maid, cook, driver, social worker, counselor, physical therapist, and parent, all for a pittance that's barely enough to live on. Story 182. In Philippines, fresh grad accounting staff, 15,000 pesos or equivalent to $263 a month, only to know that we are being corrupt by disgusting politicians. Story 183. EMT in California are being paid below minimum wage. It's beyond insane, and the reason people try to be EMT is so they can become a firefighter. But that shouldn't be the aim of being an EMT. Story 184. Basically every single low-paying job, as they are largely the people that make civilization keep running. Story 185. I mean, honestly, at this rate, everyone. But EMTs often need second jobs because they don't make very much money. Story 186. Teachers, especially with how short kids' attention spans are. How many parents don't give an iota of a shoot about their kids, and how much BS they got to deal with from administration. Teachers should be paid six figures. Story 187. From personal experience, friends and family, I can tell you most people in STEM, VFX artists, nurses, EMTs, all minimum wage jobs, considering most people can't survive off those salaries. Teachers and daycare workers don't make what they should based off of hours, stress, and skill. Story 188. In Ireland, childcare, such an important job, and it's used as a joke threat when you don't do well in school. Story 189. People who work with news channels. I have only interned, but I saw many employees juggling two things at once, as well as toxic work culture. The most chill people were those who worked in social media. Story 190. Line cooks. To survive as a line cook, you need to start with solid knife skills, a knowledge of temperature and heat transfer when cooking, incredible cool under pressure, and tight logistical management. The technical skills taken years to develop, and the psychological ones are a rare and powerful combination. Not everyone can be a line cook. Most people aren't cut out for it. I did it for a year and saw a dozen people come and go around me. All this, yet minimum wage is standard. Story 191. In the U.S., probably the majority of them, if you define underpaid as not being able to live a comfortable life and have enough left in retirement, and not have to work into your 70s. Story 192. Call center workers. Sure, it's a sit-down office job where you're in front of a computer and on the phone, but you deal with a workload, pace, highs and lows that are mentally, emotionally exhausting to the point of breakdown. And a quick reminder to all CEOs, VPs, HR, competitive pay just means that the pay is incrementally higher than the average in that industry. But if the industry itself is drastically underpaid across the board compared to the cost of living, that just means you've deliberately chosen to make sure your employees struggle, resent you. Story 193. Every job other than CEO or executive positions. When people want to raise minimum wage and the response is no, because then they'll be making what I make. That's the point. Everyone is being screwed, but most of us make just enough not to be angry enough about it to do anything. Story 194. Not to be biased, but special education professionals. I work at a facilities school where we are one-on-one with autistic children. All my students are up to age 10. I get paid more than minimum wage, but not by much. But I have been bitten more than once. Nearly got concussed once. Got choked today. Been threatened and sworn at. On the daily, I get my hair pulled and my arms scratched and pinched. None of my students are potty trained, so I wipe poopy butts most days at work. Most times I tell a stranger what I do. I get thanked. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love what I do. Seeing my kids grow and learn and shine gives me a little fire in my heart like nothing else can. Just go through a lot at work and am on the very low end of livable wages and would like to be compensated a bit more fairly, considering I know from experience how human bites feel in more than one location. Story 195. Licensed professional counselors and LMSW LCSWs. The amount of education, supervised hours, and fees we pay for licensure, CEs, certifications, etc. definitely deserve more. For reference, my first post-grad job, and even when fully licensed in community mental health, i.e., often the most marginalized and severely mentally ill demographics, was 28 KYR. My husband made more as a third key for GameStop, but we are convinced we have to stick it out to earn our stripes. Also, they promised I'd qualify for PSLF and went back on it. Refused to sign my application because the required number of contact hours didn't match their productivity demands. Story 196. Teachers, farmers, doctors, nurses, and everything else that actually makes the world go round. It's insane how much CEOs, who contribute nothing to society, get paid versus the people who raise the next generation, grow the food we eat, keep people alive, and actually contribute to society. Story 197. CNA, nurses, med students, teachers, delivery drivers, rideshare drivers, servers, waiters, airline workers, retail workers. Story 198. Educators, specifically good special education teachers and paraeducators, teachers' aides. A lot of people have no idea the work they do daily. Story 199. Architects, teachers, fast food workers, EMTs, basically everyone except for CEO, director, surgeon, athlete, entertainer, and politician. Story 200. Criminally underpaid. I'm going to be literal here. Intimacy workers. Many of them are coerced into their position and have their wages withheld in ways that would be illegal if it happened in any other profession. Story 201. You will notice a trend here. Many of these jobs were traditionally female-dominated. Aka the patriarchy in full effect, devaluing the labor of women. Story 202. EMTs, ATC, physical therapists, nurses, basically any medical field with significant patient-facing and/or emergency management components, with large amounts of grad school debt that simultaneously makes it difficult to earn six figures. Story 203. Care work of all types. The level of responsibility on minimum wage with no sick pay or any benefit at all is just insane. Story 204. Our custodians work their jerk off inside of our 177 zero-fit rec center, and they only make between $12-14 an hour. We go out of our way to make sure that our offices are spotless, as well as the staff bathrooms, and we always hook them up with lunch, but still, it's pretty sad. Answer. Custodian here. I work at a pilot truck stop. The kind of crap I have to deal with versus what I get paid. It really isn't worth it. The 15 cents off a gallon of gas they give us. Having to clean the showers after some of these people is just absolutely. I'll never understand how anybody can mess up a shower so bad. You only get 30 to 45 minutes, and they come out there and the entire room is completely covered in water. Story 205. Every job. We're all working our butts off, while spoiled brats who never worked a day in their life and inherited billions get all the rewards. Story 206. Ain't no doubt it's CNA home caregivers. I had Home Health Agency offer me $13.50 to start last year. Yes, I know hospital CNAs make more, but if you do home health care, and that requires a lot of work, and what side is to charge the clients like $50 an hour and only pay out the caregivers the minimum? Story 207. Most of them, at least in this post-pandemic affordability crisis where prices have doubled, pay remaining the same or within 1-2, means just about everyone earning under $100K for a full-time job is underpaid IMO. Story 208. I make literal life-saving catheters that will unclog your arteries, and my hourly rate is comparable to that of a BK fry cook. If that sounds scary to you, it should. Story 209. All of them. And I mean that pretty literally. Every job I had was hard compared to the jobs that pay well. The more I made, no matter where, the less I did. This is still true today. Easiest job I've ever had and by far the highest pay. It's a scam. Story 210. Public defenders. These lawyers take on the crappiest, most thankless cases and get paid very little. Story 211. Honestly, strippers. Do you know how much skill, confidence, and strength it takes to work a pole while making eye contact and reading a room? That's an art form. And don't even get me started on nurses, because taking care of people's bodies in a different way should come with a much bigger paycheck. Story 212. Anything in forestry. They do a lot. Prescribed burnings, water quality protection, timber management. I mean literally anything that could fall under keeping ecosystem healthy, They do, and they're on their toes a whole hell of a lot. Story 213, preschool teacher. My wife gets paid like garbage after working at the same school for like 7 years. She's barely up to 23 har, and we live in a very expensive town. McDonald's starts teenagers at 20 har here, and she has a college degree and is 51 yo. And the shoot she deals with can be ridiculous with these parents. Story 214, childcare. The person loving teaching your kid while you work is probably struggling to feed their own kids. Story 215, teachers, especially for the younger age children. My mom is a preschool teacher with co-teachers. Parents have trouble handling 1 or 2 children at home. Now imagine 30-40 children for 12 hours. Story 216, mason. A good mason builds something out of brick and it's still standing in a couple of 100 years. That would be pretty cool to say. My great-grandpa built that. Story 217, dog kennel work. We are contestly exposed to animal feces, aggressive animals, feline and canine, and other species depending on the field. Scratches, bites, destroyed clothing. Anxiety attacks are common in this field, which is probably the worst thing you can do when around animals that sensitive. My least favorite, chemical-soaked clothes, with chemical burns on my body, even with PPE, in order to make sure kennels are properly cleaned and don't spread disease. Extreme tempers, rain, wind, snow, heat, cold, you name it. Dog bite? Take the rest of the day off. Mauled to passing. Don't sue us. You know what you signed up for, $6.13 an hour. Don't even get me started on dog trainers. We do the things we do for doomstick animals, out of love and compassion. But be warned, even many of the animal humane societies barely get away with minimum wage for some of the worst gut-wrenching horrors you could imagine. Story 218, bus driver, 100. Drive this gigantic vehicle with kids screaming their brains out at you around tiny streets. Story 219. I've worked in residential centers and hospitals for teens. Staff, mostly across the board, are criminally underpaid for the stress of the job. You gotta love your work to stick around. Story 220. Daycare workers. Every time I walk into the daycare and hear the screams, I immediately think about how I wouldn't do that work for 6 figures, let alone minimum wage. Story 221. I say daycare workers. Taking care of 20 toddlers with 3 other women for $17, $23 an hour is crazy. I feel even worse for the ones who have to spend a good chunk of that paycheck on putting their own kids in the daycare. Story 222. Any kind of caregiver or manual labor in the sun. I'm in Florida, so maybe that skews my opinion on the latter. Story 223. Teachers, EMS, nurses, and sanitation workers. Also farm workers, FFS. Some of those poor folks are doing hard manual labor for way below minimum wage. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vancher. See you soon.